Understand your enemy, wrote Sun Tzu, better than you understand yourself. Russia is undoubtedly the enemy of the West, but stupid? We need to look at what is over the hill, beyond the clichés. Sometimes you have to be the devil's advocate, so join me, Jan Darasz, for How We Got Here.
So, Vladimir, thank you very much.
Russia's stance towards the West and its values has become a pivotal factor in both its development as well as global international relations. Russian interpretations of basic rights and freedoms differ from Western perspectives by emphasizing socio-economic rights over political freedoms. Notably, respect for the rule of law and universally accepted social norms, a cornerstone of Western civic culture, lacks substantial support in Russia. Historically, Russia has grappled with determining its development path, oscillating between Western alignment and hostility. This uncertainty significantly impacted the global landscape, influencing whether Russia adopted a cooperative or adversarial stance towards the West in social, cultural and political arenas. The evolution of Russia-West relations ranges from the conflicts of second half of the century to the apparent friendship of the early 1990s. This shift coincided with the declining interest in Western political models and the rise in Russian nationalism. After the Cold War period, Russian society demonstrated generally more positive attitudes to the West. Western experience and values were looked upon more kindly than in the decades prior, partly due to the platform of rapprochement between the blocs. However, lack of tangible developments in Russian quality of life during the 1990s period of unipolar globalization exerted a certain impact on the Russian political landscape in the 21st century. Russia's isolation from the Western world, its growing backwardness and its losing incentive for modernization became a source of new international tension and new conflicts with unpredictable consequences.
I'm delighted to welcome again to the programme Professor Agnieszka Legucka of the Polish Institute of International Affairs. Welcome once more. Great to have you.
Thank you again for the invitation, of course.
Great. We've dissected the Russian view of victory, the concept of victory, concept of power. I'd like to talk a bit about whether it's possible to get to see the world as the Kremlin sees it. Mm-hmm. If that is something that the West can do, strategists like yourself, that's your stock in trade in a certain way. And when I saw the criticism of the Olympic ceremony, the West was degenerate, the West is irreligious, this new revolutionary phase going in sexual mores. I thought, well, the Russians are actually quite right in this. And I kind of halted myself when I thought of that. But perhaps that's something that they know, that they've got it right about the West and its nature.
Okay. My first impression from your question, that Russians came up with some new idea that the West is bad or working not properly, or how, for example, Putin is calling Europe as a gay Europa. But it's not new, right? I take all the view how the world should work, or how Russians are complaining on the West, they take directly from 19th century. And they would like to see the world in the 19th century map, when the global powers were influential enough, and the head of those powers were talking to each other how to reshape the whole world. And this is the key point to understand what is behind Russia multipolar world. They don't want to have everyone aboard. They want to have only those important ones. And that's why that is because Russians feels that they are still imperial country, which needs to have, like, as an imperial sphere of influence, and also influence towards other big powers. And in that competition, they see that they've lost the Cold War, and they've lost the idea that Russia can be something like Soviet Union was during the Cold War. So they would like to compete with those bigger one, especially the United States. They see as an equal rival. But this is only the perception. They are not strong enough. In many cases, they are weaker economically, even demographically, or in other aspects. But this whole map, the territory of Russia, push them to the idea that they can be strong enough, like in the 19th century, and Putin may be some kind of Alexander the Great or someone like this. And complaining about the West, they want to all the time reduce the influence from the West towards the global world, right? So actually, I think that at some point Russians do understand that they are not as powerful as it was before. That's why they they cannot raise their power right now without modernizing the economy, modernizing the society, and etc. And that's why they want to reduce the influence of the West, Europe, the United States. That's why all the criticism that they are pointing on us is actually for us to weaken the West. And I do agree that we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of gaps in the system. However, we can complain in our countries.
Freedom of expression is...
Freedom of expression is a crucial thing, right? Because in Russia, for so-called fake news on army, journalists are going to jail. If you post the bad news about army on the social media, you are going to jail. So this is the key point, the value that we share in the West with all the problems that we have.
The Edward Gibbon wrote about the fall of Rome, and he wrote that Rome became a soft society. Do the Russians think that their society is a masculine one, has to be a tough one?
I believe so. However, there is a perception of the different kind because, for example, the territory is something that they feel that is given from God, and they don't feel this area, this sphere as something very positive because it's huge, it's very hard to control all the borders. So this is kind of a mixture of fear and being proud of what they have. However, the land, which is feminine perspective, the land was always something that was giving them food in the time of problems. That's why Russians do have dacha when they have their own vegetables, because there were many cases and experienced the hunger, for example. That's why they need to protect at least something, and this is the land, not the territory as the Russian Federation.
I suppose, so when they say Mother Russia,
exactly.
They don't say Father Russia. Mother is the land, is the feminine
that can rescue, that is protective, and it can help. But the sphere, the territory, is more like a man given and very strong, very tough. For example, in Siberia, the climate is so tough that people also need to be protected more.
We've seen Vladimir Putin bare-chested, fishing in the Siberian waters, riding his horses, all that stuff. It's a projection of a kind of an ancient Roman macho.
I think he's trying to be a macho. He is very lonely in his elite circle, which depend on him. However, he is always on the distance to other, because actually he's on one side, he wants to be very proud of this, but at the same time there is a huge fear about his position and how he feels towards others and the whole society. So this is also kind of a model for them to authoritarian and sometimes totalitarian system in this particular country.
Do we just trade cliches about each other in the internet, in the social media, on the level of soft power? Are we just confirming our prejudices against each other? Russians confirming their prejudices about the degenerate West, the West, vice versa, confirming its prejudices about, the Russian bear, or this idea of the macho state, the mother, holy Russia, that sort of stuff.
I think that Russia was quite successful regarding soft power, even with the bare imagination. However, the soft power of Russia just was killed by Vladimir Putin invading to Ukraine. Because for the West, when some societies or some people wanted to somehow think that this is a kind of a special Russian soil, and we need to protect it or somehow modernize Russia, that was the false idea. And even if Russia do have contacts all over the world, like I would say in Asia, in Africa, or in the Middle East, still the background is not Russia itself. The two elements I would name are the history of Soviet Union, how countries in Africa had contacts with the Soviet Union, so that's why there are some positive approach towards Russia, because like it's copy-paste method. And another thing is that anti-Western moods in many countries all over, anti-Americanism, anti-colonialism is a basic for also having better relation, or some maybe not the better relation, or at least positively thinking on Russia as exactly balancing power for US or for European countries.
If I can return to this idea of the earth, the Mother Russia, is that something that's lost in the West? We tend to see everything that can be our food produced in factories, in laboratories, and we see this idea of a society returning to the land, the blood and soil kind of thing, as a retrograde step. Is that something that you think that Russia has actually got it right, the strong ties to almost a metaphysical idea of the land?
This is also quite a cliche from 19th century. When I've read a lot of philosophers in Russia in 19th century, they were showing themselves, at least they were trying to see themselves in the mirror of the West, or especially that at that time, the Europe. So they were saying that Europe is a shadow. They don't have contact with religions, but we, as the Russians, we have like some kind of cosmo identity from the God, and we are much more deeper roots. We are having much deeper roots to our religion, to our land, and etc. So this division was kind of like exceptionism of Russian society. They felt that they are better than Europe. Now we have also cliche like mirroring what was happening then. I think that this consumptionist individualism is a part of our identity in Europe. It is true. That's why the business going better in our part of Europe, not in Russia itself. However, I sometimes wondering, because now Putin do not look at the West as something to mirror how Russian can behave and how Russia can identify itself. They are trying to watch on China, on India, on other countries in the East, and it is a kind of exceptionist experiment from the identity point of view. Because for centuries, as we are talking, Russians, the point of reflection of point of identification themselves was the West.
Yes.
Now I'm observing it as what kind of impact it will have on the Russian identifying themselves. So
when they look east to China, what do the Russian thinkers think about their position in the world, given the fact that the West may not be as important as it once was? China's the model. What's the What's the driving idea behind China that they can borrow?
It depends to whom you talk. Because when the political elite, for them, the Eastern model of ruling is better, because China is not complaining about democracy, rule of law, I don't know, human rights, etc., because they have similar identification of the strong leader and the strong political elite. However, the society, Russian society, is quite afraid of and at some point despise the Chinese and look at them from they would like to see it as from the top to down. However, it is when you go to China, you hear the same, okay? That actually Russia is like barbaric territory, and the Chinese do not see them as a fully equal partners, even if they are partners in evil, then like they are trying to oppose the West.
We all seem to have images of each other as barbarians and degenerates, really.
That's why there is a lack of trust. However, they have interest to in the global arena. That's for sure.
Professor Legucka, thank you very much once more for coming onto the programme.
Thank you very much.
So that's all we have time for today. Do join us again for How We Got Here.